Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for the join. Today we will continue our meeting about the Azure sales, migration to the Azure and hybrid infrastructure. We already discussed a big part of this information. As, by the way, this is about me. Please join to the LinkedIn if you want to have more additional information. You can find me by email and also by the YouTube channel. And we already discussed a big part of the sales information itself about the migration, about the pricing, Azure pricing, about how to calculate pricing, how to understand what will be migrated, etc. And the next part of our meeting, it's a hybrid infrastructure and what you can present for the to the clients in terms of the first steps to build infrastructure and how you can explain how you can calculate the cost, etc., of the basic components that's mandatory required to have on the hybrid infrastructure, plus some projects that could be realized even in PaaS, mostly in Azure PaaS, could be realized by your team directly for the customer without any high level of resources, etc., etc. And okay, we will talk about the VNETs and configuration of the VNETs to work with the on-premise LAN networks of the customer from the customer side. We will talk about the Azure Active Directory and hybrid mode of Azure Active Directory with standard Active Directory on-premise. We will talk about some solutions like Azure Files, Azure Sync, File Sync, for synchronizing the files and provide the file services. We will talk about the Azure Monitor, like one of the scenario how you can use the Azure services without the migration, exactly like workloads to the Azure. Same for the backup and Azure site recovery. Again, so you can use the client cloud backup for the on-premise machines, and more about the monitoring, more about the update management. It's a service that's named Azure Arc for servers, and of course Windows Admin Center. Plus I will bring some ideas for you about the Azure professional services and managed service practices, how to work with it, and why it's even more important things that move just clients to the Azure and left them here alone. So we discussed this part already. By the way, if you still have the questions about the migration, about the prices, about the cost calculations, etc., please ask me too, no issue. And let's start about the hybrid infrastructure and hybrid services. This is a short, let's say, short list of the services that you can use ad hoc immediately in Azure to provide the customers some PaaS solution for even on-premise infrastructure. What it means? It means that even if customer not ready to migrate, fully migrate infrastructure or some services or some application like Azure services, like virtual machines, like application services, you can talk with the customer by this list to show that, like, for example, customer can still work with the on-premise file servers or move to the Azure storage and Azure files and use the Azure files like a global available from anywhere, the file servers on cloud. So it means that on-premise machines will be on-premise files will be synchronized with Azure files in Azure, and any customer users will be able to connect to the Azure, get the same shares, get the same files, work with it like on standard file shares, standard files in on the network files, right? Work with it, and these files will be available from anywhere, especially in this current situation. It's really important part. Plus Also, these files will be synchronized with the on-premise again, so synchronized back that provides the availability of these files not only for the cloud users but also for the local users too. The same as I mentioned for the backup, so like we can backup the machines to the cloud instead of using or buying new storages, buying new backup software, etc., licenses, etc., etc. We can use the Azure automation on premise, but all data will be stored in Azure, and you don't need to deploy additional services for update management, for the configuration change management, for the inventory, etc., etc. Active Directory, we will talk a lot about the Active Directory, how Active Directory could be synchronized, and how we can use cloud identity instead to give the customers, users, direct access to their domain controllers, right? Azure Information Protection, Azure Security Center, Azure Advanced Threat Protection, Azure Cloud Application Security, all of this stuff again, so provides cloud security. It means that you don't need, for example, to deploy RMS servers on premise, or customer don't need to deploy RMS servers on premise, configure it, etc. You just turn on this service in Azure, and you can continue. Clients, users will be able to protect their information ad hoc how they need and send the protected information. Same for the log analytics, for example. Again, collect the data, collect the monitoring data. If customer use the operation manager, it could be hybrid model. If customer needs some solution to work with the distributed, let's say, clients or servers machines, again, log analytics can collect any data from any machines and provide the reports, provide the performance, etc., etc. Azure Arc we will talk about. Azure SQL servers. This is a huge part of the migration, so customers can continue to use their application on premise, but the data could be stored in Azure, like a standard SQL server storages, SQL Server databases, etc., etc., and customers will be able to see the same scenario like they have on premise. And of course, Office 365. So this is a huge range of the scenarios that you can recommend for the customers to look on it, even if the customer don't want to move against workload directly to the Azure. No. We have our virtual machines. We look on the prices. Prices is quite big. Let's keep as is. But okay, guys, you are using your machines. What about the monitoring? How are you monitoring it? How you get the forecasting and prediction? How you get the information about the capacity, what is your capacity planning, etc. So the easiest way is it's exactly the log analytics that you can use, and the price for the log analytics for one machine, we already calculated it on the previous meeting. It will be $5-10. It depends on the amount of the data, analytics data that sent from the on-premise machine to the Azure. It will be a price like from $5 to the $10 per month. But each machine will be monitored, will have the history, will have the possibility to provide the forecasting, etc., etc. Because Azure Log Analytics, it's really useful and, let's say, powerful service in Azure. The same about the backup. So, guys, you have on-premise backup maybe, but let's talk about what's happened with your backup storages. If something happened with your facility at all, right? So like some catastrophic events, fire, flooding, whatever, right? So like you will have your Azure backup with the price that's maybe even lower than your current backup solution, etc. Plus, do not forget about security. the security project, we will talk maybe after, not on this presentation separately, but you need to understand that when we are talking about the security, we are talking about the proactive, reactive, and operational security, and Azure provides for the customer a full stack of the mostly full stack of the proactive and reactive services to protect the on-premise and Azure services. What it means? It means, for example, if we are talking about the proactive security with the customers, it means that it's about asset management, it's about software inventory, it's about the hardware and software configuration, vulnerability assessment, penetration testing, malware security, identity protection, and employee training, right? So all of these steps should be done to have some proactive cybersecurity and be sure that our infrastructure configured on the right way. We have no any vulnerabilities, we have no any malware, we have right identity, etc., etc. And if you look on this table again, so when the customer asks you about the security solution in Azure, it's not mean that you need to move anything to the Azure. No, you can take the Azure services and bring to the customer on premise to help the customer manage their infrastructure. Look, for example, Microsoft Intune, for now it's an endpoint manager, right? It's exactly asset management. We can do the asset, we can do the hardware, software inventory, we can do hardware and software configuration for Microsoft Intune. So we are covering these three parts of the proactive security. When we are talking about the access from the on-premise to the internet, it's part of the vulnerability assessment and the part of software inventory. Microsoft has the CASB. CASB, it's a services, cloud application security, that's monitoring what exactly the clients, users are doing on their on-premise machine, on their laptops, etc., what data they send to the internet, which services they are using, which services are protected, which are not, which is vulnerability services, etc. Maybe it's shadow AT, etc., etc. So this service also provide a lot of possibilities to control, especially outcoming the data and services that users connect at all. So like they install Dropbox, they install maybe Facebook, and they send to the Facebook over, for example, Facebook Messenger, some important data, etc., etc. You can control this and you can prevent this by the Microsoft Cloud Security. Azure Security Center. Azure Security Center able to, because again, we can use log analytics to collect the data from the on-premise. It means that with Azure Security Center, we can collect the data from the on-premise machines and use this data to assess and monitor what's going on and what's wrong with configuration, etc., etc., for on-premise machines. So Azure Security Center, it's not only the Azure solution for the Azure workloads, but also for the on-premise workload. Azure Automation. You can use desired state configuration to configure all machines, even not on the domain. So like it's right now, it's a big question from all the customers just to understand that they have on-premise Active Directory. They have a lot of right now customers or users who are working from home, from any machine, not only from the domain machine. It's not possible to connect all these devices, all these laptops, desktops, tablets, etc., to the Active Directory to protect them by the group policy or implement the group policy. In Azure, there is the Azure desired state configuration that's allow in Azure Automation, that's allowed to implement the same scenario like group policy for each machine on-premise, etc., etc. Not only in Azure, but in premise too. So we can hardening the machines. We can apply required configuration by Azure Automation. We can again do the assessment with Azure Automation. Azure has advanced threat protection again, so it's all about the vulnerability, malware, and identity protection. Azure has the service that's named CM, Sentinel, but it's a group of the services or products system monitoring that allow you to collect the data and asset, for example, security logs, system logs, event logs, any logs file from any system to analyze what's going on inside the infrastructure, to analyze what's going on in terms of the security. For example, how's the identity going? Some strange identity was used between for the communication, etc., etc. Because Sentinel has a lot of ready-to-use machine learning algorithms, etc. It's just looking on the possible scenarios that this one could be the hack or just the beginning of the intervention inside your infrastructure. And identity protection with the Azure Active Directory and privilege identity protection. Again, it's again a vulnerability assessment and identity protection. As you can see, there's a lot of solutions that's covered. If you look on it, at least we can find 2 products, 3 products. Look, for example, Microsoft Intune, plus ATP, plus Azure Automation. Yeah, Azure Intune and ATP or Sentinel to cover all the requirements for the proactive security to protect the customer's infrastructure. About penetration testing, unfortunately, Azure does not provide the penetration testing services. Employee trainings, yeah, we need to train employee. With the reactive security, again, so it's about the monitoring itself. It's about the response, how you respond on the attack. It's about the disaster recovery and forensics investigation. So like how to use the same products. You can see, for example, for the disaster recovery, Azure Backup, Azure Site Recovery that we will discuss later. Plus Azure Site Recovery, it's a part of the response strategic forensic investigation also, because we have the copy of our machines with Azure Site Recovery and we can look what is the difference between original and copied machine. For now, Azure Security Center, again, monitoring response, because Azure Security Center will provide some fixes, fast fixes to remediate the situation. And again, we can use the logs, we can use the decision to do the investigation. Automation, response, and disaster recovery, because with automation it's not again only about the state configuration, but also we can build the runbooks that will go through the infrastructure to restore the infrastructure, start the processes for site recovery, start the processes to restore the backups, to restore the infrastructure itself, because Azure it's infrastructure as a code, so this code could be executed over the automation. And the same again for the disaster recovery. Azure ATP, again, it's monitoring, it's response, it's investigation. Sentinel, of course, it's investigation and identity. Azure Active Directory identity protection and privilege identity, it's again about the monitoring. We can monitor what's going on, we can respond, block, etc., and do investigation. And Azure Monitor, that we discussed before, again, so monitoring and investigation. And SOC, unfortunately, security operation center. Microsoft does not provide the security operations center, but based on the provided scenarios, you can talk with the customers about doing something that after that could be converted to the security operations center. And you can see most three, like, let's say, required products from the customer side. It's typically what you can recommend for the customer, even for the on-premise infrastructure, how to use and how to protect the on-premise infrastructure with Azure. So it's Azure Security Center that could be used for protection hybrid infrastructure, and it's Azure Advanced Threat Protection that could be used also for the on-premise infrastructure too, and the Azure Active Directory for identity protection, for the cloud identity, for all these users who are working from the home, from the any other places. Identity protection must have to protect the infrastructure of the customer side. Questions about this first part of the solution, security? Okay, if there is no any questions, let's continue with the technical, let's say practical implementation of the hybrid infrastructure. Hybrid infrastructure means that we have on-premise part and Azure part. The first question between Azure part and cloud part is, what? We have our on-prem, we have our servers, we have our clients, and we decided to move some workloads to the Azure. We have here virtual machines. We have here some application services. We have here some databases, etc., etc. To work from here to here, to provide for the servers here on premise connectivity with the Azure services, there's two ways. First one, it's have the public IP for all your resources and allow to connect over the internet. It's easiest way, but this way it first has the high latency and low speed, low performance, etc. And second one, it's a huge risk to publish any resources to the internet like this, because again, so like it should be like internal resources. And it's why we are talking about the hybrid connectivity. It means that inside the Azure has something named Virtual Network Gateway or VPN Gateway. VPN Gateway. It's a special service that will provide you connectivity, like you have your customer have your, I don't know, Cisco router, Fortinet, whatever they use. This router will provide you site-to-site VPN. So it means that internal IP addresses here for the customers will be the part of the internal network on premise. So internal network on premise will see Azure services, Azure virtual machines, Azure databases like a part of their network. No one will be able to connect from from the public IP addresses, etc., etc. In case if we have some clients who are working from home, etc., etc., no issue. The same VPN gateway provides the connectivity like point-to-site VPN. So it means that client need to start special agent in set up the connectivity with Azure, receive the IP address, and work with these resources inside the Azure like its own resources in own network. Same way. Okay, so this is a more secure, more protective, less, let's say, latency, etc., etc. And the right choose between all of these scenarios is really important. And you have to understand what is the scenarios you can to provide and how to talk with the customers and what exactly their expectation and how you can achieve their expectation based on the different scenarios. There is three different way, right? How you can connect to the Azure from on-premise. First one, it's already discussed, point-to-site VPN. On the Azure side, customer deploy or your specialist deploy the VPN gateway, set up point-to-site connectivity. All users who has this special agent on their machine will be able to connect to the Azure. This is absolutely clear. Second one is how connect the full network, not different users one by one, all the networks inside the customer on-premise office, etc., to the Azure. There is two ways. First one, we already discussed it. It's named site-to-site VPN. What it means? It means that exactly VPN, right? Cisco, in reality, connect to the internet provider. This internet provider sends the data to the next internet provider, etc., etc. And after 3, 5, 10 hops, package, encrypted package received to the Azure, to the VPN gateways, and decrypt, and you have your traffic. It means that when you're going hop by hop, provider by provider, router by router, it's latency, right? It's a performance, etc. And because of this, Azure provides also something named express route. What is express route? Express route, it's a part of the, let's say, operators cloud. What is operators cloud? It's a cloud with MPLS. It's network technology. Local MPLS provider connect your Cisco or whatever to the MPLS, build the full tunnel inside the MPLS, and after that connect to the Azure. It means that you have leased line, dedicated line, without exposed to the internet itself, that connects the Cisco to the VPN gateway in Azure. It's exactly express route. What is the difference? At first, it's latency. So if for site-to-site VPN, for example, in Dubai, latency will be 25 milliseconds. Express route latency will be 5 milliseconds. If we are talking about the real world examples, it will be 100 milliseconds. There will be 15 milliseconds for the latency. Why we are talking about latency? If you have some application here, and this application should take the data, a bunch of data, for example, from the database with a lot of queries, or from some data lakes or whatever, the latency will totally kill application performance. Highest levels latency, lower performance of the application. This is the rule how its network works, etc., etc. Because for each request, application should wait for a response for this latency milliseconds, etc., etc. Receive data. If it's again, so it's a lot of small bunch of the requests, a lot of small bunch of the requests, it will be totally disaster to work with this. So, and this table provide you idea what is the difference. So virtual network point to site, it's again for the end user connectivity or just for the some backups, etc., etc. It's possible to have 100 megabits performance, encryption, etc., etc., to the cloud services, to the virtual machines inside Azure. If customer need to have like a one user connected to the Azure, second user from the another network from the home, etc., to the Azure, etc., etc., it's exactly point to site. So it's just one point. End user connectivity. When we are talking about the connectivity between on-premise network and Azure, we need to look on or site-to-site VPN or express route. For site-to-site VPN, if you look on it, there is a limitations that Microsoft provide, and they say, okay, please use site-to-site VPN only for the dev, test, lab scenarios or small scale production workloads. Small scale. So like if it's a few virtual machines with the services and all data and all services stored on the Azure side. So we are not communicated like this from the on-premise machine to get the data from the Azure. No, we are communicating like this between application in Azure and get the data locally in Azure, and after that just connect to this machine like this. It's okay. But if you need a real production with the huge deployment, with the amount of the data that transferred between on-premise and Azure and vice versa, it's exactly express route. Trust me, no one client after like 2-3 SQL servers placed in Azure and clients on-premise will not use site-to-site VPN. But you have to be ready to explain to the customers the different scenarios and explain why the express route so expensive. Because again, so this is the latency, this is the performance, this is stability, and the most of the price for the express route will not be on Azure side. You will pay for express route like a gateway, some like for example $1,000 per month, but same time for MPLS cloud. For the MPLS connectivity, for the service provider, for the network provider, I don't know, like your telecommunication company, you will pay maybe 3,000-5,000 on top of the price of the Azure itself, because MPLS cloud, it's again, so it's a leased line. Telecommunication provider fix all connectivity for you and provide the required bandwidth exactly for you inside all their devices. And this price, it's not like just we want to have 5,000 from you. No, it's because again, it's because the cost of the port on the equipment, the network equipment, a little bit high. Right, and this port will be reserved only for you or for your customer, and it's how it works. And again, so like how it looks like, it's again this scenario we already discussed it about. Do you remember about the scenario with virtual data center where you have the gateway hub where you have the different workloads, etc., etc. So by default, local routers, Azure routers, and gateways that has the communication between two networks on premise and Azure directly. And this scenario is basic, but again, Microsoft says that in case of some critical situation, why it could be possible to have the critical situation? Look, this MPLS, it's exactly like a provider part. Sometimes it's required to connect a few MPLSs between different providers. And it's first scenario, right? Where you can crash some of this connectivity. Second one, for example, in Azure, there is the access points. For example, if we will talk about the Dubai and Abu Dhabi, access point for MPLS placed only in Dubai. Abu Dhabi does not have any MPLS connectivity like a data center. So it means that in case if you have some workloads in Dubai and connected to Dubai by MPLS, and something will happen with the data center in Dubai, crash it, right? And you even have the copy disaster recovery in Abu Dhabi, you will not be able to connect to the Abu Dhabi by express route, because express route endpoints in Azure place it only in Dubai. We lost Dubai, we lost all our express routes. So it's a recommendation from the Microsoft in some cases, right, to have also site-to-site VPN like a backup. Not up and running, but like a backup that will be provide some backup connectivity in case of the catastrophic event with the MPLS itself or data center itself. For the site-to-site VPN, as we already discussed it, again, so like this is the one router, second VPN gateway router. You are paying for the VPN gateway itself. You are paying for the traffic. That's all, right? So it's more easiest, but not, let's say, performance and high stable solution. Let's look for the Azure pricing. Any questions for now? No? VPN. For the VPN, as you can see, the price for the VPN, for example, it will be the size of, we will talk about the size later, how long it will work, 10 tunnels, 10 channels already included. So you can see the performance. Let's say I need more performance. And look, the traffic. I need VPN traffic, and I will send outbound traffic to the Azure. From Azure, I am not paying. And as I mentioned before, let's say 30 terabytes of the data, 1 terabyte per day. The cost of the, it's exactly 100 megabits per second. It's 1 terabyte per day. It's exactly the price like this. But for the 100 megabits per second, it's enough for this one. You see that the price of the VPN itself, it's not so high as the traffic here. So the price will be calculated by the traffic. And again, so there's two different things. One, it's a VPN traffic from on-premise to the Azure. This one between two VPN gateways. If you have one, for example, data center and another data center, and you need to do the moving the data. Okay, if we need to do the moving the data, you will have even more inside the Azure. Then just to send data to the Azure, right? So this is the first part. If we are talking about the express route, for the express route, it's even more comprehensive, because you need to understand that what you want, which zone you want to work, which scenario you want to work, because in express route there is you see standard and premium. Standard means that you have the connectivity to the data center and work with this data center. If we have the premium, it means that the premium has the connectivity from this by this MPLS directly to the any data center, right? Let's start with the premium. It's typical. Let's start with 100 megabits, and let's start with unlimited, and we will have the just only one connection. It's 500, not too bad. And as you can see, for this one, you will not pay anything on top of traffic, right? So it's just a free for you. So it's why express route also more effective than, for example, VPN gateway. That's cost for the traffic too. But you need to check what is the price for the MPLS itself. So because there is a 500, 600, let's say, right? There is a 300 for the traffic, or 3,000 for the traffics. If the MPLS for express route will cost 3,000 too, it will be the good price, because the difference with the $500 it's nothing, because MPLS has the 5 times better performance, better latency, etc., etc. If you go between the different zones, so you need to check the different zones, you will see that's where you exactly want to connect. And the premium, as you can see, again, no traffic at all. But if you need the global one, again, for the global one, outbound and inbound will be calculated. And some VPN gateways, they are split it by the generation, they are split it by the number of the possible connectivity, by the support of the zones, etc., etc. Please never provide the customer's idea to use the VPN gateway basic. It supports nothing. It supports no security, IPsec security, etc. Even if the customer want to have I need just 100 megabits per second. No, guys, it's just for the testing proposal. Yeah, it's cost 25 or $30 per month, but it's just a test. The normal one start from here. With the price 140, but it's a real VPN with, again, security, with support of the BGP, with support of the maximum more channels than just 10 connectivities, etc., etc. Questions? So, okay, if there's no questions, let's continue with the Azure Active Directory, just to understand the situation with Azure Active Directory and how it's going on, and what exactly about, why we are talking about the Azure Active Directory. Okay, look, hope you all knows about Active Directory itself. On-premise Active Directory on the Windows. For the last 20 years, it was a most used service on the Windows machines. Could someone turn off microphone? Because there's a lot of noise. Who is? Hello? Oh, okay. So like Azure Active Directory was used for 20 years, really successful product, etc. Active Directory itself contains two main parts. One part is exactly identity, and second one, identity authentication of the users, etc., etc., provides the security connection. And second part is device management with the group policy, with all the stuff that allow you to do set the configuration of the machines who is joining to the Active Directory. What about the Azure Active Directory? Azure Active Directory, it's not equal to the Active Directory itself. Azure Active Directory part, it's just a part of the authentication. But this authentication could be spread around the world. It means that if you have Azure Active Directory, any of your client or any of your users, etc., will be able to connect to this Azure Active Directory, authenticate from anywhere. The question, how this authentication will be used after, right? And the identity will be used by on-premise Active Directory or by Azure or by another services like Office 365, etc., to provide the access for exactly this user. So like we ask to check my credentials, Azure Active Directory check our credentials. Azure Active Directory, if it's part of your Office 365 deployment, send your credentials to the Office 365, and Office 365 provide you your mailbox, your Teams, your OneDrive, etc. In case if we are talking about the on-premise solution, we connect Azure Active Directory and on-premise Active Directory. Azure Active Directory does the check of user and sends the credentials to the on-premise Active Directory. And premise Active Directory decide how it will be used in the normal way for the standard, let's say, old-fashioned application. It's how to use. So, and we are using right now the Azure Active Directory mostly for the administrations, for Azure administrations, right? To have the access to any Azure services and client application inside the Azure. So if you put some code in the Azure to get the access to this code, if it's protected code and required identity, Azure Active Directory will provide the ticket to have the access. Plus, as I mentioned before, it's Office 365, it's Microsoft 365, it's Dynamics 365. All these services use the Azure Active Directory, users Azure Active Directory to authenticate the customer and provide the access. And the main idea here, because it's like open to the world, it's open worldwide. Anyone will try to. So previous one, it was like a recommendation for the on-premise Active Directory. Please do not never expose your Active Directory to the internet, to the external connectivity. If you want to authenticate users outside your organization, please ask to set up VPN connectivity. After that, they will be able to connect to the domain controller, etc. For Azure Active Directory, we have again vice versa, opposite way. We put it on the internet. We have all our users in internet, all their passwords, etc. there. And we need to have the right weight connectivity between Azure Active Directory and on-premise Active Directory. And secondary, we need to have protection that's to be sure that only allowed users, right users, will be able to connect to our Azure Active Directory. And Azure Active Directory has a lot of additional services inside. It's conditional access, it's identity protection, it's privilege identity management, it's different methods for the authentication. Like we can switch between how we want to. It's MFA. multi-factor authentications. All of this stuff, again, inside the Azure Active Directory. And before doing the hybrid configuration, you need to understand that as far as you turn on the hybrid configuration for the on-premise Active Directory and send your users to the Azure Active Directory, it means that these users will be in danger. And before you need to define or talk with the customer about how identity will be protected and how they will be protected, again, so like conditional access. It's a first step for the protection of the Azure Active Directory. Can someone turn off the mic? Who is? No. It's yeah, okay. So first one, it's a conditional access. What it means? It means that when the customer trying to connect to the Azure Active Directory, we can do some checks of this connection. First one, we can say that, okay, if the customer comes to this group, etc., we will check or not check. If the customers come from the special IP, we can define the fenced IPs that we need to use, right? For example, we can say that, okay, we know that our customers working on this networks regularly, etc., because this is our office networks, etc. They anyway connect to the internet to have the authentication. We need these IP addresses, so or add the special IP addresses from what networks they are typically connected. We can define the devices, etc. So like say that I want to have just Windows devices, or I just want to authenticate only iOS devices. I want to authenticate the client only if the client trying to connect to a special application. For example, I published my Active Directory, Azure Active Directory to the internet, and I published it just only for one thing, Office 365. So if user trying to connect to the Office 365, we will provide the authentication. If not, we will not provide the authentication. Plus, we can define the exactly identity protection risks. I will talk about later. So like we can check what's going on exactly right now with the user. We can get the information from the Microsoft Cloud Application Security. We discussed it before. So this is the agent, install it on the client machine and collect the information how user connect to the internet, which data it sent to which services, etc., to check again the security vulnerabilities, etc. This is a conditional access. So like customer before explores the Azure Active Directory to the internet need to have the conditional access. And after that, based on the conditional access, client can say that, okay, if customers are not in these rules, we can block, or we can grant, with multi-factor authentication. We can grant with some specific group for multi-factor authentication, etc. Second one, it's identity protection. What it means, identity protection? Identity protection is a real-time checking of the users, what's going on with the current user's login. For example, user connect to the Active Directory, Azure Active Directory. From where, how often, which location, etc. Identity protection is again real-time technology inside the Azure Active Directory that's check, for example, this user already logged on from the Abu Dhabi, and right now he's trying to log in from the Dubai. In 5 minutes, it's not possible to move. So what is wrong with this user? It's a risk, right? It's a typical travel too. For example, I always login from the Dubai, but right now I am trying to log in from Ulaanbaatar, right? I never log in before from Ulaanbaatar. It could be the issue, maybe the account is hacked, etc. And this identity protection sends the information to the conditional access to understand what's going on. Or just to have the log, like you can see, to understand and analyze, etc., etc., etc. A lot of different things, anonymous IP, atypical travel, malware, leaked IP address, so it's possible that's already used by malware, unfamiliar sign-in, like I tried to connect from the Android, but before I never used the Android or never used this type of the devices, etc. Leaked credentials, it's possible that's like already the account on the database of the leaked credentials, etc. So all of this stuff, it's identity protection. It sends the real-time information, what's going on, conditional access, make decision about the real-time calculated risk from identity protection and continue. The same we can do with identity, privilege identity management, PIM, to protect administrative accounts to work in real environment and be protected. And why we are talking about all of this? Because Azure Active Directory is free. Basic Azure Active Directory features with authentication, etc., etc., for free for the users. And they are just balanced between, okay, it's free, or I have to pay like $5-10 per month for the identity to protect my identity. You have to explain the users that, guys, in real world, that's like conditional access without additional payment, without additional license, like Azure Active Directory Premium 1, P1 or P2, right? It's nothing. It's just only the identity that's not protected, and you never knows who exactly authenticate, because it's global solution. It's open for all. And if you want to block the identity, if you want to protect your identity, you need to look for the conditional access. You need to look for the MFA in case of the stuff. For example, we know that's like I have atypical travel, or I have a new country, right? It's possible. I am traveling. In case of the identity protection and conditional access license, P2, right? My account will not be blocked just like because it's something strange, but the conditional access will say that, okay, in this case, please ask me again to reapply the MFA, and I will be asked to provide my MFA credentials. Some SMS will be sent to my phone, or a message to the special authenticator application will be sent, etc., etc. So this is how it's work, and why it's important, because customers typically do not understand the real threat of this Azure Active Directory exposure to the global world. It's not because it's like a not protected system. It's protected system, but this system works with the credentials that could be stolen, that could be just write it down on the paper, that could be device stolen. In real world, like right now, you know, it's like just I don't remember the numbers, but just only in New York City on the public transportation system, metro, buses, taxi, etc., about 70,000 devices are losing like every year with the credentials, with all of this stuff, right? It means that it could be hacked, it could be have no password to log in, etc. And it means that after that, all this information, all this identity, etc., etc., will be used with the atypical scenarios. This is the first part. But we have second part, we have understanding how we will build this solution. It's also really important because in hybrid identity, we need to understand who will lead authentication. It means that we have Azure Cloud. We have Azure Active Directory on site. We have on-premise Active Directory. Will this Active Directory and this Active Directory the same? For example, to get the access to the office, user have to have the same ID like on-premise, or maybe the organization is planning to have the different ID. It's named Cloud Identity. It means that Azure Active Directory exists separately from the on-premise Active Directory, and we are talking about just like a user have the name and password on-premise, and user has the different name and password in Azure to connect. And if the password here changed, it's not about this password, it's another password, etc., etc. It's quite, let's say, annoying scenarios, but a lot of users, especially who don't need to move their on-premise application to Azure or authenticate their users on-premise over the Azure, they are not using this scenario, right? And this they are using this scenario like a cloud identity, just a cloud identity, just to have the access. But most of the organization who is moving from on-premise to the cloud using the synchronized or federated scenarios. What is the difference between synchronized and federated scenarios of the Azure Active Directory? It means that on-premise Active Directory has a special agent. It's named Azure AD Connect, the service that sends the credentials from the on-premise to the Azure. So we have the copy of the users from on-premise to the Azure. And we have, in case of the synchronized, copy of their password. So when the user uses the ID to connect to the Office 365, user uses the same username and password to connect to the Office 365. If we are talking about the federated, it's more, let's say, complicated scenario. It means that we are using AD Connect for pass-through authentication, or we are using the special service named Azure Active Directory Federation Services. We synchronize only the usernames here, and when the user trying to connect to the Azure Active Directory to get the access to anywhere, Azure Active Directory in reality check users on premise, receives the response, and after that user has the identity and connectivity. So this is the different scenarios for the synchronized and federated connectivity. If you look on it, there's a few main points that you need to understand. Which main points? First of all, if we have just a password synchronization and user synchronization, we lost a lot of possibility to work with different types of connectivity, support, for example, cards, how the users will be blocked, etc., etc. For example, if you look here, in case if we synchronize the passwords, we, for example, block the user, but we block the user on Active Directory, and the user on Azure Active Directory will be blocked only after the 30 minutes delay, only for the next authentication synchronization. In case of the federation or pass-through authentication federation, you will have the same like response like you have for the on-premise user. So like you disable account, user disable it automatically in Azure Active Directory. You locket account expired, password expired, sign in hours, all of this stuff will work on this authentication. So back to the Azure Hybrid Active Directory. It should be really accurate way to discuss with the customer which way of the Azure Active Directory should be selected, because typically, again, so it's pass-through authentication the best way, because it's provide a lot of options, a lot of features, a lot of possibilities to work with without installing the special services like Azure Azure Active Directory Federation services. But in some cases, if you look here, right, it will not be possible, for example, to use the smart card identity, different scenarios with username and password identity, etc. Yeah, again, it's required hard work for your technical teams to better understand the situation on the customer side and check all pros and costs to work with the data. And there, as you can see, which licenses are included in the different on different E3 and E5. So because to buy, for example, Azure Active Directory Premium, you need to buy or E3, Microsoft 365 E3, or Microsoft E5 licensing to have all of these capacities. That's what we discussed. Questions? So, no questions. It's too deep or too easy?
I have a question. When it comes for an exam for AZ900,
Sorry?
I have a question for the Azure exam,
Uh,
AZ901. Okay, can you hear me now?
yeah, yes.
Okay, yeah. I have a question for regarding the exam part. So there is the exam comes Azure Fundamentals AZ900.
Yes.
When such in the exam, the questions given as an MCQ, as a multiple choice questions, or does it comes with the cases?
It comes for the different scenarios. It comes with the cases. It comes with the multiply choices. It comes with the scenarios where you need to, drag and drop the different answers to the different fields, etc., or place on the right order.
Mm-hmm. And also, non much the technical person who has very little like intermediate level of person. I'm saying that sales engineers and the salesperson can able to give the exam, right? Not only just the special engineers.
No, it's mostly saying that this exam is even harder for the technical people than for the sales people, because it's again, so like there is a lot of question about the licensing. There is a lot of question about the support, which type of support Microsoft provides for the Azure. It's a lot of questions about the different SLAs, etc. So like yeah. Let's say if you will go through the Microsoft has the quite good self-learning
Materials.
yes, Microsoft learning of Azure Fundamentals. Where it should be? Nope. Maybe some. Here. Yep. So this one. Let me see. For example, compliance and all of this stuff.
So through online, is it free or
Is it free?
paid?
Is it free?
Oh, okay, I see.
But,
So, like,
but
as much as the participants will gonna fulfill the model, and it straight away puts automatically the exam dates, right?
yes,
Ah, okay.
so you can go through. Okay, back to the more technical stuff. So what about the technical stuff? I mean that which one we can faster implement for the client. As I mentioned before, Azure Files in hybrid environment, it's the best way to work with the file. So if customer has a lot of different file servers, etc., it's not required to move the file servers like a virtual machine in Azure. It's much cheaper to have the Azure file storage inside the Azure and place the data here. I will show you the example. Let's take virtual machine. Just imagine that we have a file server with the 30 terabytes of the files, right? 30 terabytes disk. Let's take again North, Windows operation system. For the big storage, we will need at least four. No, V3. We will need at least 4 CPUs. This one, right? Okay, let's say we have Azure benefits. Okay, let's say that we don't need to have like a really fast solution, so standard SSD will be enough, and we will have the one disk with the 32 gigs of storage. This is the price for the virtual machine, you see. Plus bandwidth that you need to send back from the Azure. Let's say again, I don't know, let's say they are using the terabyte per day. This is the cost to move Azure file server, just a standard file server, to move to the Azure like virtual machine. So the price will be a huge one, just to be sure, right? $2,500 per month just for the virtual machine. In 2 months or 3 months, I will be able to buy with this price normal servers on premise. So that's, what is the reason? It's exactly why we are talking about storage accounts. If we look to the storage accounts and say that we will store some data in UAE North, it will be file storage, it will be transaction optimized, it will be local. We will store data at rest for the 30 terabytes and snapshots for the some data. We will synchronize the data with the 1 or 2 files, and the data transfer. This one, it's not about us. So the price will be 2,000 with the synchronization from on-premise. But in reality, we are not using the 30 terabytes of the data for the file storage. We will start as is how many files the customer needs. We don't need to replicate, because in virtual, in client machine, we have the disks, right? But we don't need to replicate the size. Typically, like 30% of the disk always free. So like we can say that it will be 20 terabytes of the real files data, not operation system, not some logs, etc., etc. And we will see that the price will be twice less than have a virtual machine. It's why more easily to build the Azure files share on the Azure, connect this with the Azure Active Directory to provide the identity. We can switch these files anytime from the to the different modes. I mean, for example, like hot, transactions, cool, when we need just to store as the data. You got my idea, right? We have the huge file. Is anyone use this 20 terabytes or 30 terabytes of the data always? No. We can use a premium, yeah, it's a fast transaction optimization or just a hot, all right? Plus, we can easily switch between the different redundancy. That's like the copy of the files, GRS, global replication, right, between the different data center. We will be able to select different data center and replicate data there. We can choose the zone redundancy. Zone redundancy will provide us possibility to store between different zone inside one Azure region, etc. So like, as you can see, we can play for the different scenarios and try to find exactly what we are looking for, what exactly we need for to work with the client's data. But anyway, if we look here, the price for the solution is now it's 4 times less than provided by the virtual machine. Even with the geo replication, we are not paying for this replication. We're just paying for the multiply storages. But in case of the virtual machine, we will need to build 2 virtual machines with the same sizes. And we will get, again, the price for 2. And it will be really different from here. Exactly more than 5 times. It's why Azure files, it's a really important part of the migration. How it exactly works, it's no issue to just copy files from the Azure, or from the on-premise to the Azure. It will be the same share, like a customer can see, like drive Z, drive, I don't know, like drive T, O, whatever. And this file share will be able to publish it by VPN, with VPN gateway, point to site, site to site, or express route, as we discussed it before. Or clients can even connect directly over the internet by authentication over the Azure Active Directory, synchronize it, and files will be available to user will be available to get the files by their identity. In reality, just for you to just look how it looks like on the fast way. Look, I have the blob storage. I have the file share. I just click I want file share and name it this file share. I put the quota for the terabytes of the disk, for example 10 gigabytes. I put it on the hot. I don't need transaction optimization, etc. I just create it. That's all. I have the share in Azure. It's again my share in Azure. I do not do the synchronization with Azure Active Directory, etc. But you can see I can choose the different Azure Active Directory, etc., etc. But I am using the key. I am using the letter, let's say U. I am copy the script and start the script. And if I take U, I have disk U, empty disk U, when I start my browser, I can see drive view here. That's all. It's really that's all. I can take all my pictures here. No, not this one. It's for the previous demos. And put it here. How much? It was the limit. Yeah, I see. And you can see the performance. You can see how the files copied. You can see all of this stuff here. And when we will, go back and refresh, we will see these files. That's all. It's exactly why Azure Files is a really great improvement when the customers need to have some hybrid infrastructure, need to optimize their infrastructure, need to look on the what's going on, right? Exactly with the data, etc., how to work with. But again, this is a lot of small files, yes. So with the small files, it's take a time because the performance of each connectivity will take a lot. But when you send one big file, you see it's going up. And it's again the question about the latency of your connectivity to the Azure. Are you using the direct connection? Are you using the public connection? Are you using the site-to-site VPN or express route? For express route, it will be like the same way how you as you have the local file server. So we have it, and we can see our files here. All these files. It works. And again, Azure Files has the Azure File Sync. It means that I can set the replication between on-premise machine and Azure to synchronize these files. After that, after I configure the synchronization, after that, when I change the files here or change the files on premise, system will be automatically synchronize the content between two locations or three locations, or how much location you need. Is it clear? Next one, backup. What it means for the backups? It means that again, so like you can use Azure Backup to protect on-premise infrastructure. What you need, you just need to install the agents that will send the data from the on-premise machines to the Azure. Any customer, again, can go, can go to the Azure, can create the recovery vault. Where is my vault? No. Just a second. Disaster recovery. We can create this recovery vault in West Europe. And we will have this storage and all backup service utilities, I mean server application in Azure. After that, just download the agent, install agent, configure agent on the machine, and send the data to the cloud. Look, so we have the backups, we have start. What we want to do, we want to do the on-premise replication for what? For system state, for bare metal recovery, for the files and folders, and here is the preparation instruction. So if you're using the system data center data protection, it will be plugin for the data protection manager in on-premise. If we are talking about the separate solution, we will need to download this backup server. We will need to use the special key to authenticate, and after that, we will just see the backup items here. That's like you see, like backups on premise, etc., etc. That's all. So we don't need to create these huge storages. We don't need to create the backup software, install and configure backup software on premise, etc. We just configure the client and go straight. That's all. Why it's more interesting, if you look on this, the prices and the ways how it's work, it's better if you can see from the on-premise to the cloud backup. Azure has the numbers like total cost of ownership. This is the cost of the ownership for the 1 terabyte to store on the Azure for 1 year. Oh, 5 years, sorry. For the 5 years in Azure or on-premise. Azure has about 1.7 thousands per life cycle. So this is like what you or your client pays to have the license, to have the storage, to pay for the utilities, for all electricity, etc., etc. Administrative cost, because again, so like it's required to manage this solution, and the same if it will be the cloud backup. As you can see, the difference is really huge. But again, the deployment and agility, how you can easily add the new servers to the backup. You don't need to care about, or customers don't need to care about the storages, right? About the software itself, just to send the data. It's a good point to discuss with the customers about the backup. And again, we already discussed the backup from the previous time. It's no like ways like what we are doing with the backup. We just send the data, backup data to the Azure. It's for free. Only the data that you send from the Azure, you have to pay for it, right? And for the backup solution, we just pay in what? We just pay in the number of the virtual machines and the amount of the storage based on the, do you remember, on the 500 gigabytes. We are on premise, we are here. One server, 500 gigabytes will cost $10. 1000 gigabytes will cost $20. Okay, let's say that we need to store our 30 terabytes of the storage. It will cost this one, right? Plus, we want to have some 12, 6, 5 years. We want to have this backup policy. We have to moderate. Plus, look, the backup itself also the geo-replicated or local redundancy, so we can automatically have a protection and copy that it's not possible for the local on-premise backup. So that's a good point too. If the customer looking for the site out backup solutions, You can talk with the customer about, let's move to the Azure, and in Azure you just can switch the backup from the mode of the local redundancy to the global redundancy. You can do the cross-region restore or not cross-region restore, etc., etc. All this stuff will be available for the backup automatically here on place. Second disaster recovery feature that you can use with the Azure and provide to the customer, it's Azure Site Recovery. What is the difference between backup and site recovery? Backup, you are using the backup just for virtual machines itself, right? So like backup the machine, and if something will happen, you will need to restore this machine from the backup. In Azure Site Recovery, it is the replication of the infrastructure, and you can go through you can go through and replicate anything you want. For example, let's say here. This is the disaster recovery, where you can see the replication between the machines and networks and all another assets in Azure. So it means that this virtual machine in real time replicated to the second region in Azure. It's not about like backups, like we did the backup every 6 hours. No, it's a real-time replication. And you can see that RPO recovery point objective says 12 seconds. What it means 12 seconds? It means that if something happened with the original machine for now, we will lost only 12 seconds of the data that was recorded on this machine. So only our 12 seconds, maybe it's nothing. Maybe there is some important data, but anyway, so like just imagine for the backup, for this machine you can see 3 seconds. Maybe it's really important, maybe not. Again, so we don't know. But anyway, when we are planning this kind of the migration, when we are planning this kind of the replication or protection, we can understand 44 seconds. It's quite big. We can understand what we have and how we can answer on any crashes, etc. Plus, it's not again only about the replication of the virtual machine. It's also about the infrastructure, how the network mapping, which network mapping where, who is the original, which one, etc. It's about the policies. It's about another recovery plans that provide you ability to restore what you want with the right way. So like how we will copy, how we will restore, which order of the restoration, etc., etc. This is Azure Site Recovery. And again, you can recommend for the customer to use Azure Site Recovery not only for replications of virtual machines or infrastructure between the Azure data center, but it's absolutely possible to replicate infrastructure between Azure and VMware, or VMware and Azure. You can replicate Hyper-V virtual machines to the Azure. You can replicate physical servers to the Azure and have the replica of the infrastructure in real time. This is exactly the idea of the Azure Site Recovery and hybrid infrastructure. In case if a user customers don't want to move all their workload to the Azure, you can talk about the Azure Site Recovery and explain the situation. For example, what will happen if you lose this, and this server? Backups, yeah, fine. But what about the effort to redeploy these machines, to restore it from the backups? What will happen with the catastrophic event like a fire or flood, etc.? And you lost your infrastructure. What will happen? So, like, how you will restore this faster, even if you have the backup offsite? How you will restore this infrastructure in Azure after that? But with Azure Site Recovery, it's possible to have the replica of all your virtual machines, physical servers, right, inside the Azure in one click. So you just need to implement the special master target server, process and config servers. It's just a virtual appliance to send this data, right? That's all. You will have all required copies in Azure. In case of catastrophic event, we just start restore plan, recovery plan, and start all of this infrastructure. Second one, or third one, right? Another service that's really important and can be used in Azure, it's Azure Monitor. What it means? It means that Azure Monitor, it's a feature that work with all Azure services, collect different information, collect different monitoring data, collect different alert management system, etc., etc., provide a lot of visibilities, etc. And in reality, it looks like, again, let's take any virtual machine. Let's take any virtual machine here and look to insights. No? Why we are not using here? Maybe. Strange. Okay, just a second. Another. Okay, let's take this one. This one is the log analytics, where you can see what's going on inside the machine. You can see all the performance inside this machine. You can see the statistic of machines. You can set the alerts of each machine. You can see the health. You can see the maps. You can see the connectivity details for the machine itself. So, like in this case, as I mentioned before, we can extend the log analytics to the any. And why it's another workplace? Just to say, I'm trying to find more, let's say, interesting scenario. ECMS. But ECMS we tried. Oops, no. Mm-hmm. Why it's not turning it on? Strange. Okay, let's take another one. This one, for example, we can take insights. We can look inside the log analytics. Who is connected right now to the machine? Which service is working inside the machine? Which service is connected to where from this machine? Which protocol, which ports, etc., etc. We can see the connection details of these machines. And these connection details, you can see, for example, the way, what exactly service work, what it's doing, what's data transferred, how many data, when this data was transferred, and on the different, again, location, on the different services, etc. The same way, based like on the log analytics, you can install the same agent on the on-premise machine and collect any data from the on-premise machine and do the prediction. I will show you. Do the prediction of the machines. Like, for example, we need to look on the capacity planning, right? And on the capacity planning, we can start this one. This is a log analytics, again, request. Just a second. Yes. This log analytics request show us the sizes of each disk on each virtual machine. It show us the disks for the last 30 days, last month, and after that you can see the drops and empty chart, because this one, it's about the forecast. If we will switch to the forecast, you will see that forecast predicts the number, like free space for this machine from the 42%. In 1 month, it will be dropped to the 68%. Same way, we can find another topics where it's dropped really significantly. So like this log analytics collect the data and allow us not only the monitor in real time, not only get the alerts, not only look which connection is vulnerable connection, etc., etc., but also can say that, okay, guys, we lost from the 90% to 80% in 1 month. What we have to do and how we have to react on this situation with this prediction, etc., etc. So you can demonstrate this for the customer, and you can provide them idea to collect all information from the log analytics to work with. And what the customer exactly just need to go and install the agent to work with. So like download the agent, use the ID, use the key, let's go. Machine will be automatically connected and working with, if it's Windows machine, and send the data, or if it's Linux machine. So no issue to work with these scenarios. Okay, I show you the demo. Another thing that again, so like more global solutions than provide just monitoring, is Azure Arc. What is Azure Arc? Azure Arc, it's a solution. I will have the demo after. It's a solution to not only monitor the machines, but also have the updates, have the identity and change tracking, apply the policy. Do you remember that I mentioned before that we can implement the security center and security center policy for the virtual machines on premise? So like it's exactly Azure Arc. It will provide analyze and provide the policy violation, audit, etc., for the virtual machines. To connect the any on-premise machine to the Azure Arc, it's just need to start the special script that could be downloaded from the portal, or could be started from the Windows Admin Center, or could be done automatically with some, again, Windows feature and or Azure features. It could be any machines, like a Windows machine from 2008 R2 until the new machines, like Windows 1000, Windows Server 2008, 18, sorry. It could be the Ubuntu, it could be Linux, CentOS Linux, it could be SUSE Linux, Red Hat Linux 7, and Amazon. So the customers will be able to use the Amazon Linux to monitor their machines on another clouds. And the main idea here is that if we go to the Azure Arc, we will see all our servers that's placed somewhere around the world, right? This is, I think, wrong one. Just a second. Yeah, this one is right. We will see a lot of servers here. If you look on these servers and look on these names of the servers, these servers, it's exactly the same servers that we used before for the demo of the migration. And these servers send the data to the Azure, and we can do the updates. We can do, again, the insights and monitoring. We can do security checks. It should work. We can do update management, check the machines that should be installed, etc., etc. We can do the inventory to check what's going on the machine, collect the data, etc., etc. You see, it's like what happens, what changed for last time, which services was installed, what exactly the application, what changed, files, Windows services, stopped, started. We can do the change tracking. Again, so you can see the changes until the services, etc. This is exactly the Windows Arc. So take the server, put it on the Azure like an object. It's not, again, so migration of the service. It's just an instance that's provide. Why it's not? That's provides the accessibility for the all servers options, etc., on premise. No changes. It's strange because inventory says that last update we receive today and 3:55 p.m. Why it's offline? But anyway, yeah, we can look on it. We can track the policy. We can find the non-compliance configuration inside this machine. We can do the update management, define the updates, which update should be installed, which not, the compliance of this machine. We can do the inventory. We can do the track changes, and we can do the insights to monitor what's going on with machines. We can look on the performance. We can look on the insight metrics of this machine. Let's check. Yeah, it works. It's strange that like this system shows that please install update, because for now it works and it sends the data. You can see it sends the data for the last 24 hours for updates, etc. But anyway, this is the way how we can again track the servers on premise. And the last one for the customers who is planning to move to the hybrid infrastructure, it's Windows Admin Center. Windows Admin Center, it's a free to use application that provides you or customer console to work with the servers on premise, to monitor servers on premise in Azure and configure all of this stuff like backups, like file syncs, all of this, Azure Arc, etc., from the one place, and do not even touch the Azure itself. So when the customer deploy Azure Windows updates, Windows Admin Center, let's see, where is my virtual machine? It stopped. Just a second. We will be able to work on it. Copy it. You can see that Windows Admin Center already deployed here. And after, we will be able to go like this. And ta-da! We can see what we are managing. We can add additional servers here, and we can go to manage each server itself. Why not? It's strange. it should work. Really strange, but whatever. So like, we will be able to connect to the server and look on, maybe I need to install updates, and look to the server and configure the server, whatever it's placed on Azure, not in Azure, and configure the same hybrid services like on-premise services and Azure services for one machine, to do all of this stuff that I mentioned before. Connect to the Azure Arc, connect to the monitoring, connect to the backup, connect to the file servers, all of this in one place. It's a Windows, again, admin center to work with the on-premise and the Azure services in one console. Unfortunately, demo does not work. And some ideas about the questions. Okay, if there's no questions, okay, some idea about the Azure Professional and Managed Services. So like Microsoft has some Azure MSP, Managed Service Provider, who has to provide some services on top of Azure. Why it's important? Because customer satisfaction, typically, it's not about the migration to the Azure. It's about how after the customer will be able to work with the services on the Azure, how the customer will solve their business solution or business needs with Azure. And as I mentioned before on the previous meeting, right, previous presentation, understanding the knowledge or skills, experience of the customer's team or your team to work with the Azure, it's really important. And right now it looks like not a lot of the customers have the team who is ready to support Azure infrastructure after the migration. And it's why Microsoft says that Azure MSP, it's really important on the infrastructure. But same time, again, so like you have to understand that current situation of the managed services, it's not about the managed services like you are locking the machine and you are doing some daily routine tasks like restart the virtual machines, etc., etc. No, to restart the virtual machines, it's enough for the customers to have the WAC, Windows Admin Center, or even Azure Portal. It could be possible, right, to train the level 1, etc., etc., or just regular admins to work with the Azure virtual machines like a just operation system. But what the customer is looking for, it's about advisory, it's a strategy, it's less manual work, less, let's say, the basic, like, oh, your machine is stopped, to go to have application SLA, to go to have the automation, to go to have the monitoring solution, to go to review and help to review the infrastructure or deployment, etc., etc. Not just like, we have this infrastructure and please look to these virtual machines. No, Azure, it's not about the virtual machines. Azure, it's about that you react on the some changes on the business or customer business or your business and change the infrastructure immediately. Or if you have some capacity requirements, you change the infrastructure immediately. And it's exactly about the new kind of the managed service providers, new cloud managed service providers. It's your responsibility to do everyday job like a project, continuous project, let's say. when you will have more even money, if you look on the calculation of the margins for the managed services, it's more even than professional services, because you are trusted advisor. You are not going to the project, you are going out of the project, going to the next project, etc. No, you are controlling all this line of the project until all life cycle of the customer. You are controlling, for example, the spends and the customer utilization, and you provide them idea how to do best the utilization, they calculate the prices, etc., etc. And in these cases, you receive the second way of the money, because you are also CSP, for example, and you can easily control how your customers spend the money, what is utilization, etc. And to have again the managed service provider. What exactly a managed service provider? It means that your team will be able to provide most of these services. You can see, for example, it's my team that's we provide in the green or rose or purple, whatever services, like this one for the customers. It's split it to the standard premium, standard managed services and premium managed services. Red and yellow, it's provided by another teams. White, we are not providing the white services like a managed services. And you look, as you can see, for example, lift and shift, etc., etc. It's not a one project. Customer has a lot of servers inside their on-premise infrastructure. Customer work with us and pay us like a managed services. We have like a 30% of their utilization, their spent inside the Azure, like a price for the managed services. And when the customer comes and says that, okay, guys, I want to move the 10 or 50 virtual machines like lift and shift to the Azure, we are ready to help them, because it will grow their utilization of the Azure, consumption of the Azure, and our again, so like payment for the managed services will be growing too for the 30%. So like if they have 10,000 consumption per month, we have 3,000. If they will move additional 50 servers and it will bring additional 10,000, we are absolutely interested in this project and ready to help them, because after that they will have the consumption for the 20,000 and we will have the managed service income for the 6,000 per month, twice. It's why we are ready to do the lift and shift, not like a project, but on the terms of the scope of work of the managed services itself. And the same, like you can see, we are doing most of the projects, most of the operations, like managed services, continuous integration, and continuous services. And trust me, it's the best way than do the professional services. Like, it's better to sign the contract based on the consumption, for example, percentage of the consumptions of your managed services, than have the professional services project by project. You need to spend the money, you need to spend the resources, you need to wait your professional services people need to wait until project will be started, but you have to pay them salary. But same time, if you start managed services with consumption and say, we will do what you want based on our scope of work, lift and shift, no issue. Yeah, it's project, small project, but you don't need to pay it. It's already included on the price of the managed services, and we are growing your consumption by lift and shift, and we are growing our income because it's directly connected to the consumption. So it's how it's work on the managed services, and please look on it, because again, after you sell something to the customer, even migrate to the customer will still need your help, because lack of the experience, lack of the skills, and best help when you convert your traditional managed services to the cloud managed services to be, again, advisor, to do a lot of monitoring, to do a lot of automation, etc., 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 to provide the best solution, because the Azure itself, it's a dynamic infrastructure, not like a standard one. Questions? Okay, if it's no questions, thank you for the attention. We have like a few minutes to move again, so like you can find me. Hello?
Igor, thank you so much. Dear partners, thank you for your visit our meeting. We will finish. I will send you recording after our event, and see you soon on another meeting. Have a good day.